Hello everybody and welcome to another RCT2 review stream. Today we are going to take a ride into the past and we're going to look at Six Flags Worlds of Excitement by Phatage. This is a park that came out in, I want to say, 2003, and at the time it was one of the quintessential realistic parks and held up for quite a number of years. As we look through the park today, you'll see that the architecture and details and things like that may not have held up super well, but the coasters still do, and it still is a good guide to thought process behind making realistic parks throughout. So we're gonna jump right on in and take a look. We're gonna start in right at the entrance. There we go. So this was a time of questionable custom scenery choices and a lot of kind of strange details. But for me, as I was just getting into this type of RCT at the time, this was one of like the parks that I was interested in and what I based a lot of my work on or tried to emulate. So this one goes back a good ways for me. So as we come in through this front plaza, there's a pretty nice size parking lot here, which we'll come out and see afterwards. But we come to the entrance plaza here. There's a pretty decent sized billboard here for Superman Ultimate Flight opening in 2004, and we're going to get to see that halfway under construction here shortly as we go into the park. All the usual bits and pieces are here. There's ticket validation as Twicket validation, which amuses me. And then group sales here, and then hand stamps and just the other kind of re-entry parts and pieces, park map right here. So all the typical realistic details, disco floor in here for whatever reason. But once we're into the front plaza, we've got a couple of things. We've got our Ferris wheel on this side. It's the charm wheel. Pretty nice fountain over here, and just a nice open plaza. A lot of shops and things like that. And here's the stroller rentals and the wheelchair rentals as well. Some questionable color choices, perhaps, with the yellow and the green. Definitely stands out as far as buildings go, and things such as this with the checkerboard roofs or alternating color roofs, I guess. But again, this was pretty evident of a lot of the style at the time. Granted, I think it was certainly kind of mind-blowing at the time. Here's Enterprise, and then over here we have the Grand Carousel underneath a pretty nice little structure here with some questionable American flag scenery, and then also this whip ride, custom scenery shaped as a ride, which is kind of neat. I think today we just see that as a shoestring. And then our big observation tower here. I appreciate that it's a custom tower, kind of modeled after the other Intamin ones. And it actually does have the pathway up here, although I imagine that a lot of people are going to get stuck up there, as RCT peeps are wont to do. So that's a little bit of a shame. And then a neat little stadium here on the diagonal, which is cool. Again, disco floor being used to advantage. And then the fireworks barge out here with these kind of odd fireworks objects here 10 feet from the log flume. But that's a neat little design there, and a pretty good theater. We'll see a lot of theaters in this build, actually. So we can go one of two ways. We can cross over in this direction, or we can cross over in this direction. We're going to head straight back into the park. We're going to go under this building and into this sort of western town type area with the first of our coasters we'll get to. This is Continental Express. This is an Arrow from 1980 or 1969, so this is a pretty early mine train. Some of these architectural elements here, such as this fort, looks pretty similar to what you would see at Great Adventure in their area. Let's see here. So this one didn't want to work, so we're gonna run it again here and see if we can't get this to do what it's supposed to do. Let's roll this out. Here we are. Alrighty. So we have a typical Arrow mine train here. kind of a neat little touch with the transfer track over top of the railway that goes through the park. So the railway station also shares this structure here, and that wraps around the rest of the park. But it's kind of neat to see the transfer track structure go over here. No thought process, though, to how you get to that space, but the fact that it's there is good. At the time, all the catwalks were done with custom scenery elements, so it's now still custom scenery. We passed beyond using the 4T coaster as stairs. But this is a nice little layout. It's meandering, has some larger drops for a mine train going through some of the buildings here with the flat corners. But it's a pretty good look. And then we have the second station or second lift here with a full brake run just before the lift, which is appropriate. And then the second lift, which typically on aero mine trains, the second lift and the second half of the ride is going to end up with either some bigger elements or kind of one bigger final element. And I think that is this drop right here with this pretty substantial two-turn drop around this little mine scenery, weaving around a new coaster, Medusa from 2000. So this is 40-some years later. And then we head up into the brake run. A nice long brake run, which fits. This coaster could easily run 3 trains, and that brake run is pretty much long enough to accommodate that, which is good. Jumping back out onto the pathway, we've got some game stalls here. This is one of the better looks as far as game stalls go. And then here we have Hatchet, a swinging inverted ship. And then another game stall here with the basketball game, and then we have the operators here. Which is kind of cool that we have those details there. Here's a sign for Superman here, just so that you can see, and there's a couple of different other ways to see the ride as it comes through. I will look at that in just a minute. I like the plaza details here. The scattered pathway is a good attempt at that sort of a thing. It's maybe a little a little bit rough perhaps, but I like the little fountain here with the bridge over top of it. The fort, here's a little fort ride on this side, and just all the various parts and pieces. Here's a couple unfortunate stalls, Dippin' Dots and then the McDonald's there. But at the time, Six Flags was using a lot of external vendors, like a McDonald's, for example, in their parks, and they still are. Panda Express and those types are still there. Here we have a Scrambler, and then over here is another theater building. This is the Pioneer Theater. I do like the alternating color of the of the seats, and then they have a pretty nice little backdrop here, some speakers scattered about up top. So let's take a look at the Superman. We do have this under construction, so it's kind of neat because you can I'm happy that he did it under construction, because you can definitely see he's going for the standard Superman Ultimate Flight layout. But you couldn't have built that really in the way that the game is arranged, since the pretzel loop would have to be diagonal, which is right here. So he just has that partly under construction. So it's kind of a nice touch there. We have the various pieces of track being brought out. Here's a concrete truck pouring all the footers. Train goes right through the middle and underneath with this current lift, so there's an OSHA violation for you. But neat crane and pretty well-designed details here. Honestly, this is one of the better elements in the whole park as far as I'm concerned. Just really good detailing and just fun kind of special parts and pieces that make this feel like maybe it was one of the later things that was built. Alright, so we're going to take a left turn out of the western area past the Tilt-A-Whirl. There's a little bit more western stuff as you come down this way and cross over into the log flume area. So let's go this way first, because these are both dead ends. So we'll cross over to the log flume building. So this is the Stream Forest Flume Ride. We have a circular station in here. Can't really see it outside of the structure itself, but pretty nice sized structure. A little bit of clashing as far as some of the textures go, and some random walls, such as this steel one kind of intermixed among the other things. But you head down into a drop right off the bat outside, once you get in. So this is into this little tunnel here, underneath the pathway, and then up on the other side, wrapping around. I feel like the Ferris wheel is one of those typical expected things for log flumes used as the mill wheel. But some nice details there. I do like that. You can't really see it from the path, but a lot of log flumes kind of go off and do their own thing. But there are these great details like the little huts at the drops and the lift hills for the employees to sit, as Six Flags tends to do. All those sorts of fun things like that. More of the game stall. So here's bucket ball, it says, and just some other little elements there. Here's Phenomenon. This is the swing ride, and on this side we have the Cruisers car ride, which is actually really hard to pick out until you remove the scenery here, just to see how much is going on in there, because there's quite a bit as far as layout, but you can't see it because there's so many trees, but that's pretty appropriate. A lot of these rides had some of the theming, like you can see the mine theming here, but for the most part it was just kind of buried in the trees. Alrighty, so here is the Flashback. So this is a Schwarzkopf from 1979 as we depart the station here. Train's facing the wrong direction on the transfer track, unfortunately, but this is a really good layout based off of the Schwarzkopf coasters at Six Flags Over Georgia, which is Mindbender from 1978, and Shockwave at Six Flags Over Texas, using this tri-rail sort of Intamin-looking track within. So this is a early track merge as well. So let's take a look at this layout. It is a very appropriately Schwarzkopf layout. One thing Phatage did very well is he knew his coasters. So we have this little pre-drop, barely making it over the hill into the first drop. Then this kind of dip and rise turnaround, which was a pretty standard thing, into these two loops right along the water. Probably would have lifted them up just one off the water. Same thing over here, dive down. Little mid-course brake run here as it wraps around with some turns. And then an outward banked corner here, or outward banked hill, which I kind of like, wrapping to some final bits and pieces here. Just these little banked hills just for some subtle curvature and everything else as it returns to the station. So really good layout, one of the better ones in the park in my opinion. Kind of a cool queue line here, and I like the backdrop of the waterfalls and the coaster coming in front of it, and all of that with the screening pieces here. You can kind of see the attempt of the structure behind that facade wall there, which is neat. So that looks really good. On the back side of this structure for the log flume, you also have a billboard as you come into the park. So Big, So Close was one of Six Flags taglines for a little while during this time. And then you can also see this really cool diorama for Six Flags Hurricane Harbor next right, with the pirate elements and everything else. Alright, so this is a dead end, so we're going to backtrack up and head down the other dead end. Park layout over here did struggle a little bit, but there are a number of Six Flags parks where that is the unfortunate case of some of those areas. So here's a climb the ladder game, which is kind of rudimentary, but a pretty cool attempt at that. Nowadays, we typically use like the Wild Mouse track or something like that, which is a little more smaller, finer detailing. Underneath here is Road Raid, which is kind of a good name for bumper cars. And you can see in the process is a Sky SWAT being built. So Sky SWAT, there were two of them. There was one at Thorpe Park, and there was one at Six Flags Astroworld, which was then moved to Six Flags New England, both of which are now closed, unfortunately, because they were quite fun rides. The angle is quite possibly incorrect here. I think it was probably meant to go this way, as this building and this building would probably have to go in order to fit that ride, since it was a pretty long ride. So the carriages aren't built, but the towers are for it. So it's kind of neat to see something, another one under construction. Pretty garish pink and blue building over here, but then another one of these theaters inside. This is the Coliseum, and I do really like the seating here, wrapping 3/4 of the building on the curve, and then you have the glass roof so you can at least see inside. Here's a pretty classic Six Flags Games area with the one big building in the back and then a number of remote buildings in the front. This feels appropriately like what a Six Flags park would be doing. And then over here, we have a indoor simulator. So this is Sharks 3D Adventure. So there's 4 different simulators here with the disco lights and all that kind of thing. And then here's the screen in the front. So this is meant as one of those open-sided or open-air type simulator buildings or open seat type simulator buildings where you look at the screen and then all the cabins move independently. Over here we have the Lethal Weapon show and the motocross grandstand. So we have the show area here in the water, and then the speedway here. Speedway says prototype motocross, so a little bit questionable here with the jump and everything like that, but it was kind of a neat trick with the invisible track and that kind of hacking. But the park struggles a little bit over here. I think Map Edge was somewhat of a challenge there. Here's utilizing the Pendulum custom ride, which was not one of the better ones, I don't think. And then here's a Chaos, which is neat because Chaoses were a pretty big thing at the time. It's hard to find those now. Another game stall just right here. Again, using the textured pathways, which I still do like. I think this attempt is a little bit better than the 3-color brown over there. I think this works pretty well just to kind of show a little bit of an aged setup. So here's Medusa. Architecturally, this is pretty similar to Medusa at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, sort of this temple-esque architecture. Sponsorship, which is cool. Corn Nuts as a sponsor here. And wrap around to the other side, and here is the actual entrance into the space. You got these cool caryatid type skull pillars. And then winding through here with another skull with the neat little waterfalls coming out of the eyes up into the station itself. A couple of other cool details here. Here's the motor room for the lift hill on this one. And then we'll pick this one up on the lift hill. So this is train 3. It is an 8-car train, which is appropriate for this type of ride. A nice custom layout here, but still follows some of the general conventions. You can definitely tell this one is based off of Discovery Kingdom, since it has the Sea Serpent roll, which is only featured on that one as far as B&M is concerned. But we have a nice big first drop into a loop, into a dive loop, and then some low cornering, some speed here, wrapping into that Sea Serpent roll. Up into the mid-course brake run, using a block brake so we can actually run 3 trains. And then into the interlocking corkscrews, which is a pretty common thing on the floorless coaster. That's kind of where it was introduced, and it features pretty prominently in a number of those layouts. Final helix and up into the brakes. Really nice transfer track here, also very detailed, and that's one of the things that that he's done quite well is maintenance areas, transfer tracks, and things like that. One kind of cool note here, just as to the reason why you see the slope on either end of the catwalks. This is not just a detail here just to follow the slope. These are called stairs to nowhere, and they're done so you can maintain a clearance envelope for the coaster as it comes in, but you still have a fully protected staircase with railings all around it. So you can't just put a railing across on either end to protect it, because if you were reaching your arm out as the train came in, you would hit it. So you go down a couple of stairs that have a railing on either side, and then it wraps around and closes. So they're called stairs to nowhere. They're used on real coasters, and it's kind of a really great detail that shows some good coaster knowledge in there. All right. Continuing across, just point out the cool trench here that was pretty nicely done. All right, so that's another dead end. So we're going to head back to the other side of the park now. We get over to here. So this is a custom flat ride of some sort. I think it kind of looks like a tornado, perhaps. Not quite sure what that one is meant to be. But up here, sort of hidden in the back, we have Category 5, which is the Rapids ride. I have a neat name for that. A pretty small Rapids ride as it stands, but there's a lot in here to look at. Really good Rapids section, a couple of nicely themed spaces, and these pretty big waterfall kind of monument elements. But on the back of that, you have all the pumps and the gears and everything like that. So definitely an attempt at facades and all the detail work behind it. I really like the drop underneath here in the back with the waterfall channel on either side, and you can't even see the boat because it's just so far down in there. That's a pretty nice detail there. And then also using the Ultra Twister lift hill for the actual lift hill on the thing. or on the Rapids ride. And then working around the obviously giant coaster here, which we'll get to in just a minute. Alright, so coming across the other end, we get to the kids area. So this is Bugs Bunny World to some extent. This giant tree here is reminiscent of, what was that, Magic Mountain? And some of these other rides kind of fit that whole theme here. So we have a school bus here. There's another ball pit here. Slide in here, play slide. Here's a little theater space, and then also some back of house storage type area here behind the facade of the building, which is nice. Good touch there. On the corner here, we have a little bounce house, bounce ring. And then on this side, it's Silly Wabbit, which is a miler from 2000. So it's definitely a custom layout miler, and maybe not my favorite, but it's got some interesting bits to it. So it's got a little tiny lift hill right off the bat underneath the other ride there, and then come off the drop with a pretty big curve drop around the whole thing. A couple of crossovers, which is nice, and then a helix up into the brake run, or not even the brake run, into the station. So this is a single train operation. Definitely a custom layout. It kind of is reminiscent of the, now it's called the Joker at Six Flags over Georgia, custom Chance Rides Big Dipper. Kind of feels sort of in line of that, perhaps. I like the little pathway here that's kind of put in. It looks like kind of an informal employee pathway that employees have just kind of cut through back areas through that space, which would get some people fired since that looks like it's in ride restricted areas, but so it seems. But we'll continue through our Bugs Bunny land, because you must go through that land in order to get to the rest of the park. Again, the park layout here is probably one of the, maybe the weaker elements, but I can kind of see where it's having some trouble, and just some of the rides that cut off some parts and pieces of it. But we are going to cut in over here, and we're going to head to Gotham City. This is Gotham's Intercity. It's a pretty big area here. It's got a couple of coasters that we're going to check out. So we'll go over right in front of us first and take a look at the Riddler's Sewer Plunge. Nice custom supports on the backside here, and the drop, and then also the bridge over top of it for the water splash. We have the dry side here, which has a little wall so you don't have to get wet again, or this side where you can go and fully embrace getting soaked by the giant wall of water that comes along. Nice queue, good station, some nice details there, very bright green, using that green to advantage. Here's another arcade, and some other game stalls here, another basketball game on this side, more Dippin' Dots carts throughout. Here is the flip side, which is a top spin. And then we have a pretty nice Batmobile here, and then also the Batman sign on this side, which brings us to Batman, which this is a recreation of Batman the Ride, which has been replicated at a number of Six Flags parks. This is the mirror image variety. The standard one drops to the left versus the right, so a couple of them have been mirror imaged, including Batman over at Six Flags St. Louis. So you, theming wise, it's similar to all the other ones. You start going through the Gotham City Park, and then you head into the sewers, and then come up into the Batcave, where you start your journey. So we have a two-train variety here, with a very good recreation, one of the better ones in my opinion. Little pre-drop here into the diving corner. Loop 1, 0 G-roll, and loop 2. Got some trenches back here. Up and around the turns here, a little bit slower. Corkscrew to the right, which a lot of people get incorrect, and then corkscrew to the left, over top of that track there coming out of the loop, and then back and into the brakes. So well done on this one. This is definitely a pretty strong recreation. Nice work on the supports, especially on the lift hill, since those are sort of the lattice supports. It's kind of a good use of that ball object there for the joints. Right over here we have Axis Chemicals, which is a neat ride, kind of funny, sponsored by Poland Spring, being a chemicals thing. But big show stadium, well, actually probably the biggest stadium in the park, and a pretty good show set here. Some back areas also. So this is a pretty sizable show venue. Would have been kind of neat to see some more details in there, but I do like that there's all the various elements to it. And then here's the Batman show sweeper. So show is off for now, but I'm sure it will be coming at some point during the day. Continuing over to kind of the transitioning out of the Gotham City area, we have the Music Express, which is the world's largest music express, it looks like, standing but not operating. Would have been neat to see that one going, but another nice touch that you have those kind of rides that Six Flags tends to do. And then some track back here for the flying coaster getting built in here, so it's kind of neat to see that staged out here. And then here we have Giant, which is Giovanola from 2002. So this is based off of Magic Mountain's Goliath and Titan from Fiesta or Over Texas. Pretty massive Giovanola hypercoaster, using a similar layout to the others as well. So we're going to take a ride on this guy. This is the biggest ride in the park. Just slow over top. I love the brake on top that has it hang over the edge. That's a really cool touch. And we have our flat corner here, diving down, diagonal airtime hill, and then a long flat section here into the corner. These Giovanolas are hard to build in RCT because they're so drawn out and so big that it really forces you to put in a lot of flat sections or these kind of banked curve sections that look a little rough in the game, but it's appropriate and it looks good as far as the layout goes, in my opinion. So kind of a neat sweeping S-bend coming down, and then into this helix that the Giovanolas are so known for, with the intensity of grayouts and blackouts. Trench at the end, and then up and into the brakes. Nice touch here with the catwalk that goes up and connects with the lift hill from the mid-course brake run. That is a thing that exists. And also just really awesome job at the support work. These are so support heavy, and with this custom scenery available at the time, this is a great look. Let's take a look at this one more time, just how it slows right down as it goes over top of the drop, which is so cool and a really, really good touch. Maybe my favorite detail there. So here's a couple of just buildings. I don't know if these are meant to be employee housing or just some kind of residential type buildings. That I'm not quite sure what the structures here are. Potentially some themed elements that are in the back areas also. I have one more ride in Gotham City, and it's one of the more interesting ones in my opinion. This is Ivy's Whiplash. This is a Premier Rides from coaster from 1998. This is based off of the Mr. Freeze or Batman and Robin the Chiller coasters that Six Flags had, or still has in some cases. It's a pretty neat ride with a cool elements here. So first thing to note is the two stations inside with the sliding transfer track, because that's how the real Mr. Freeze does, is two stations that slide into the middle and then launch, and then backing out to the back areas also once again. So I'm about to load here, waiting for the passengers, so let's launch this thing. Using the Schwarzkopf track for the launch elements, this is the limb motors, up and into a pretty big helix here, and then this is a nice touch, in my opinion, using the launched lift hill pieces to get that extra boost so it can make it back without having to over launch the first part, just so that it can get back in time. So a pretty nice design here, and again, massive supports, but they look really nice, done quite well. Just barely makes it over that cool custom inversion, but this feels very much like something Premier Rides would be up for building. So very nice there. All right, so we're going to backtrack once again, and then we're going to look into this final area of the main park, sort of an Americana type area. So this is Screaming Eagle. This is a John Allen from 1974. First thing to note is this kind of nice transfer bay here with the sliding curve track and dropping up underneath the station. That's pretty good design there. And then Boston Tea Party, the spinning cups on this side with the seats that are kind of look inaccessible from the back here. But let's pick up the coaster. This is a Outback wooden coaster. It's using Soaring Eagle, but most probably, at least from a layout standpoint, looks to be based off of Great American Scream Machine at Over Georgia, or the Screaming Eagle at St. Louis. I like the triangular out and back into the water park. Low hills mixed with high hills, nicely flattened, so it looks a little bit drawn out, which is appropriate and not something that was done super much at the time, but I think this is a really well designed coaster for one. Here is maybe the only one that I don't like, is that tough hill there. But covered brake run, the John Allen wooden coasters of this era would have had skid brakes, and skid brakes can't get wet, so that would be covered, which is appropriate there. Here is a Sky Shooter, which is a chance skywheel ride, and I don't know if a Six Flags ever had those, but they're pretty wild and hard to find, even at fairs now. And then this was one of my favorite rides when I was just starting out looking at this park and trying to emulate a lot of the features and everything. This is the Great American Scream Machine, borrowing a name from the Six Flags parks, an Intamin first generation drop tower, and a working one at that. So a little rough around the edges as far as theming wise goes, but for the time this was super convincing and a super well done job. Which it was the first style of drop tower. Before the magnetic brake was developed, it still had to be braked on the horizontal, so this is what we came up with as far as a drop tower goes. Definitely super cool, and something that was really one of the more interesting things. So a couple of different upcharge attractions as we get further out. So this is the speed carts, which let's wrap around and actually get to this. So the way that you got here was outside the entrance before you actually came into the park, which is kind of an interesting choice, was the couple of these guys in a row. So there's the speed carts, which is the go-kart track. Typically, a Six Flags park does have a go-kart track. Looking through a number of them that which do or did, and it was an upcharge attraction, but usually it's within the park. Same thing for the skydive or sky coaster here. I love the supports on this one, utilizing the impulse coaster track and then the chairlift cables coming across, and it's working as well. I definitely spent a lot of time reverse hacking this thing so I could do it myself in my parks, and it was a pretty clever and cool idea, and I'm assuming pretty innovative at the time. And then over here we also have the thrill shot. So from SNS, this was another SNS ride that a number of parks did have that not too many of them exist anymore, I don't think. But then we also have this various garden shop for whatever reason over here, flower shop with the irrigation in the back here, which is kind of a neat little touch, but I don't quite know if that's based off of anything in particular. And then another basketball game out here as well. But if you keep going, you get to Hurricane Harbor, which is the water park here, and I give Phatage a lot of credit because he made a lot of these rides work and made a water park more interesting than the static display. So we start out with the wave pool here, which has some pretty cool fountain elements to simulate the waves, since I don't think we had the rapids little quarter tile pieces at the time. I like that they're on an angle because that's usually how wave pools spit out the water, is at some kind of an angle. And most wave pools can do multiple different patterns, and then the park just sets the intensity and the pattern at the time. A little changing area here, some seating, and a little fountain on the side. Volleyball court and a little beach soccer pitch is well done there. Up and over the lazy river, which has the rapids boats kind of stacked here as tubes. It's a pretty big lazy river, including some of this pretty cool theming on the backside here, which I like a lot. Most of the buildings here, such as the locker building and some of these other guys, are pretty massive and don't necessarily look the best, but they cover all the various parts and pieces. Here's the tiki room, which I assume is a restaurant bar type structure there in the middle. But then we get to some of the rides themselves. So this one's not working, but we have a couple of different rides here. It's Big Bamboo, Wahini, and Matui. Speed slides there. But if we go to this side, we do get to see some working rides. Again, this is a hack that I spent a lot of time trying to emulate. So you can see this guy is currently working its way up the ramp that will be used for guests, and then will reset itself up at the top and then go down the ride. So I liked this a lot. I think it was clever, and it actually gave some motion to what would be an otherwise static park. And it could be rideable too, because this is an entrance and exit down here that the guest could actually get on and ride, which was neat. So once it works its way back up there, let's speed this up just a little bit so you can kind of see what it did. It stops there, same with the red, and then after just a little bit of time, it'll kick itself off and go on down the drop again. So really neat, really well done. I like it. Some more architecture here, definitely sort of this layer cake approach of wall tile, floor tile, wall tile, floor tile, wall tile, roof, which works, but I think there are definitely better ways to do that. And you look at some of the more modern parks, and you can see that that looks arguably better. In my opinion, this splash pad is one of the best things on this entire map. It's super, super well done. We have the little lily pad and monkey bars set up here. A couple of little kid slides here. Loving the dump bucket, and then all just the other interactive elements in the park. It still feels believable with all the stairs and climbing elements as well. But it's just done really, really well and feels detailed and like you spent a lot of time thinking through what that looks like. Back here, we've got a couple of other elements. There's the Cooney Family Rafts slide using the Rapids ride and the bobsled track. It's still something that I see pretty often these days and is a nice design. Key here is just continuing to utilize the downward helix so you can kind of get that movement of the raft. It's definitely a little bit chunky for the ride type or the track type, but I think that's the best there is to offer for family raft variety. Again, stacked boats here, which is quite nice. And then the other raft rides here, this one doesn't have a name, and this one doesn't have a name, but I would imagine, no, Coaster Slide 1 and Coaster Slide 2, so perhaps that is the name then. Here, and I do like the little water curtains throughout. I think that's nice, and definitely something that I can certainly say that I copied when I was starting out also. So really well done on a lot of these parts and pieces. This shaped my park building starting out for sure. Coasters still the strong point in this park. Architecture hasn't necessarily held up. Let's look at the details out here. Little parking lot security structure out here. I'm not quite sure the idea behind the ice detailing, ice and snow underneath of here. I do like the use of the queue line piece as the handicap parking. I think that was pretty clever overall, and we actually have some signage names for each of the rows coming in. Here's a tram lane or tram coming across that it's kind of neat, although it doesn't particularly get you close since it dumps you off over here and you still got to walk past all this. But I like the idea of kind of forcing guests to walk past this cool kind of vignette of these two loops and this huge fountain element behind it. Like that's a cool approach to the ride. And on this side we have some structures, this little strip mall type shop, and then over here there's it looks like a gas station, and then a hotel over here. This is the Right Inn with a pool here, and then also a little billboard for SixFlagsNews.com, which was a site back then, and one that I believe Phatage either worked for or contributed to, since there's also a little SFN on the roof here for Giant. And then all these billboards coming in, pathways coming across. I do like this bridge across the roadway too. So you definitely had those elements there, and then walking through these various parts and pieces to all those details. So, and then lastly, a point out the custom light poles in the parking lot using those circle balls again. You definitely use those objects to advantage in here. But I mean, again, I think you got to consider this as a product of its time. Like when this came out, this was groundbreaking and absolutely amazing. So even though, I think when you compare it up to current standards, the architecture and detailing and kind of path work doesn't quite hold up. The coasters sure do. The supports, I think, sure do. And then just a lot of the other little details and considerations of realistic details really do hold up super well compared to the other things that we're seeing now. So I think there's a lot to be learned from this park, and it's definitely one of those kind of what I'd almost consider a required reading of RCT history. Uh, so Six Flags Worlds of Excitement wraps up our review for today. Hope you enjoyed the review. If you would like to see anything else reviewed, one of your parks or another park, feel free to leave a comment in the YouTube comments or send me a note at nedesigns.com. My username is Cedar.6. So please enjoy this review and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching.